Hey everyone, I'm Toby Israel, the content manager at NuMundo, and this is Yudit, the founder of ESD Global Empowerment Self-Defense. And we're going to talk about something super important.
Absolutely.
Can you describe what is empowerment self-defense? What does that mean?
Well, I think the easiest way to describe it is there's a spectrum of violence, and therefore you need a spectrum of solutions to violence. So when you look at the world of martial arts, and it doesn't matter whether it's judo or karate or kung fu or taekwondo or krav maga or any of the other systems of martial arts, they are primarily systems created by men for how men fight men. And empowerment self-defense has been created and crafted over the last 40 years by amazing women, many of whom have martial arts backgrounds, but also have backgrounds in psychology, education, and social work. And they looked at the spectrum of violence that women, children, people with disabilities, LGBTQ++ communities, and other vulnerable populations experience on a daily basis, and built a system of answers, solutions, tools, responses to that type of violence. So a lot of it is physical, but it's not all physical. There's a big emotional piece, and we base it on 5 fingers or 5 principles, which is think, yell, run, fight, tell. So think, good for me, bad for me, very dangerous, just irritating. Who else can help me? Who else might be interested in harming me? Can I run? What are the options here? And it's not linear. Like sometimes you don't have time to think. You have to fight first. Sometimes you can just get away. You just feel something's wrong and move. So think, yell, use your voice. We teach women to yell, back off now. So that one day they'll be able to say, hey, I don't like the way you're talking to me. But if a woman is always afraid that if she sets a boundary, it's going to get physical, and she doesn't have the tools for that, she might not set that boundary. So the physical tools give the foundation for the ability to say, hey, I don't like the way you're talking to me, get your hand off my leg, whatever it may be. So it's that balance of, in addition, I need to feel that I'm worth protecting. So there's a big worthiness piece in here, that it is my right to be safe, and I have tools that I can use to be safe. And that, if something is going not the way I want it to go, I can say something. So think, yell, run. Well, run's conditional upon what? On what shoes you put on that morning, or how your ankle's feeling, or, well, if this is the distance between me and Mr. Not So Right, I may not turn my back on him to get away because I'm not comfortable about that. So I also have to understand that I may need to do something in order to be able to get to safety. Think, yell, run, fight. That's an easy one. How do we use it? It's interesting. We say fight, but we really mean defend. And a lot of people are put off by the, fighting for freedom kind of thing, that's just like rubs me the wrong way. I am anti-violence. But first and foremost, I am anti somebody being violent towards me. So it's a defense. We use this for defensive, needs, but not because I like fighting. I would rather to never have to use what I have.
And I often get from male friends, when I mention self-defense, they feel worried that because a woman is learning self-defense, she's going to go looking for a fight. And that's not what it's about. We're not.
It's absolutely not. It's absolutely not about that. And if you think about it, it's a little ridiculous. Men learn how to fight. Is that because they're looking for a fight?
No.
I mean, maybe that's some of the experience, but it's not the majority of the experience. I think most of the people I know in the martial arts, understand and know that martial arts practice is for in the dojo, in the place where we practice and learn. And, it's in a controlled environment, and we respect the people we work with. So, the people who are getting into fights are not necessarily those people who've been trained to fight. Mm. So why would somebody think that if men can compartmentalize that, women can't? You know, my knowing how to fight allows me to walk through the world in a more confident manner. But that doesn't mean I want to just go out and kick people for the fun of it.
And so I had the pleasure of taking an ESD course in Costa Rica earlier this year. And one of the biggest takeaways wasn't about, and the physical self-defense is huge, but it's also the conversations that we have in ESD about setting boundaries and saying no, right, which are skills that I definitely wasn't taught in school.
Absolutely.
Most women aren't. Gavin
de Becker, who wrote a book called The Gift of Fear and has done some other books and does a lot of speaking and is the a well-known expert on violence, sums it up like this. When a man says no, it's the end of a conversation. When a woman says no, it's the beginning of a negotiation. And that's got to change. I want to educate children of both genders to know that when somebody says no, you respect that. That no means no. And, consent is important. And consent happens on a line of, I know what you want, you know what I want. And it gets missed sometimes. Like, we think people are mind readers. Mm. And that's something that's got to change. But she said no in the way that means yes. And well, did she really mean no? And did he really mean no? And no. If you have any question, ask. Think, yell, run, fight, tell. So tell is important too. And the telling is that we create safe spaces for people to talk about success stories and less than successful stories. Didn't feel like I handled that right, or I'm not quite sure what to do in this situation. And creating that safe space, it's really interesting. We've become a culture that immediately talks, pops up and talks about how good somebody is when they've been accused, rather than talking about how good the person is who's accusing.
And how powerful and courageous
they are. And how powerful and courageous. So how do you, how do you create a culture that says, okay, nobody was there. Nobody saw what happened. But I'm not going to believe one side more than the other. And, one of the things that I've been talking a lot, I do some parliamentary work in Israel. And one of the things we talk about is the law, no matter how strong it is, no matter how strong prosecution is, will never be there at the moment that it happens, which means that most violence happens in private. It always is about your story and my story. So the law can't intervene there, really, because there needs to be a burden of proof. And how do you come to a burden of proof? The only thing that can happen between you and me in a closed room is how I can defend myself or you can defend yourself against something that's not going right.
And can you share the statistic about the percentage of sexual assault that is perpetrated by someone a woman knows? Because I think that's a really significant one.
Yeah, so around the world, we know that it goes anywhere between 83 to 86% of attacks are by someone known. And again, we know that with children, predominantly it's somebody known, because they have to have access. So how do we protect against that? And there it's also more complicated. But you guys you do traveling, right? So
right.
How is this pertinent to travel? Because you may or may not travel with somebody you know. Now you get to know somebody and you decide, okay, we're going to go on a 4-day trek into the woods. Is that somebody known or unknown?
At that point, you're deciding that you know this person well enough to go into the woods with them.
Okay.
That's a judgment call.
And that's a judgment call. And you may need tools to handle yourself in that situation. So while there's also a spectrum of known to very well known to okay, known for a little bit, we make decisions all the time about who we spend time with. the stranger violence is different in different places. There's no question about that. It also depends on where people are hanging out, but it shouldn't matter what type of violence it is. What should matter is, it's like saying, well, does it matter whether it's salt water or fresh water? Well, no, if you know how to swim, it doesn't matter what the flavor of the water is. I have the tools to swim. Mm-hmm. Fresh water isn't more dangerous than salt water. Salt water is not more dangerous than fresh water. I need to know how to swim in both of those ponds. And I think the tools of empowerment self-defense actually do that. They give you the physical skills, the emotional backup, and the verbal fortitude to make your needs known, your boundaries clear, so that you can get through the world in a much safer place.
And I think, again, the conversations about boundaries are so important, because it's maybe easier when you're in your own culture to say, no, this is wrong and this doesn't feel good and I need it to stop now. But as soon as we step outside into an unfamiliar context, we start to question that intuition a little bit, where, well, maybe this is a cultural thing. Right. And sometimes maybe it is a cultural thing, but that fact of feeling uncomfortable in a situation is still valid to the individual.
Absolutely. So I'll give you a success story that I never knew was a success story. That happened to me. I was 18. I had gone with friends of mine, a couple, to camp on the beach in Israel, in Eilat. And what we would do is, when the lifeguards would go home, we would occupy their hut and put out our sleeping bags, and wherever you could get space, that's where you slept that night. And this young fellow who had been hanging out with us, we were all young fellows at the time, hanging out with us on the beach that day, put his sleeping bag next to mine. And well, they're a couple and we're not. And at some point it got very touchy and very feely. And I was like, hey, no, come on, I want to go to sleep. And a little more touchy feely. And hey, come on, I want to go to sleep. And finally I just looked at him and I said, do this. And I went to sleep. And that was the end of it. But that made a very clear boundary. I said no. And then he was trying to pull his hand, and every time he tried to pull his hand, I just tightened it a little bit more, went back to sleep. But I made it very clear. And I've never told that story as a success story.
But it is.
But it absolutely is. And why wasn't I afraid? And maybe I wasn't afraid because there was another couple in the room. Maybe had I been alone, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have been able to. I would have let him convince me into, But there was somebody else there who was right there.
Or maybe if you had received ESD training, you would have felt empowered to set a boundary and defend it, if you needed to, in a different way.
Yeah, it could be. I would just say, buddy, roll over, go to bed. And he would have gotten the message.
Right. So before we sign off, is there anything else you want to share about the message, about really something I want to say to the NuMundo community is that ESD, empowerment self-defense, we're trying to make it a global movement. That's why Yudit and I are both here, along with about 30 other amazing, powerful women in New York, training to be ESD instructors. And
so we are in the process of getting up 30 women through level 1 training for empowerment self-defense. We searched the world for how many countries could we get under one roof, and we did pretty darn good. I think we got Venezuela and Chile and the Dominican Republic, Israel and Canada and Australia and Estonia and Slovakia and Canada. They count, the US. I'm probably missing one, but
more or less those.
That's very exciting. I think it's super exciting, and I really appreciate you inviting me for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure.
See you guys later.